Hi, well my name's Paul and this is our 71 Ford Torino, and it doesn't look like much at the moment. We've got it all very stripped down into a million pieces, but we are slowly building it up into being what we call a resto mod, which is basically where you take a late model drivetrain and you make it drive a bit more like a modern car. So the motor we're putting in it is a Coyote motor with a 6-speed automatic, and we're also putting an aftermarket suspension, so it's running the RRS brand of front coilovers, steering rack, big brake conversion. We've got a 9-inch in the rear, which is running the disc brakes as well, and that's a Dutchman housing with a strange axles and strange diff. With Ford Explorer rear brakes. Bought the car as a roller. So this is our Coyote motor, and that's out of a 2013 Ford Mustang, and it's coupled to a 6-speed automatic transmission, and that's got 2 overdriven gears, so 5th and 6th are both overdrive. It's a very short first gear, so it should accelerate really well, but it should have really good open road long legs, which will make it really nice for some of the big road trips we've got planned. Obviously this motor never came out in this body, so there's a lot of modifications we've got to do, and the first one is we've got to cut the strut towers. So the first modification you have to do to make these big wide motors fit into these cars is you've got to cut the strut towers, and you'll see there's a big notch cut out of there, because normally that goes right down there where the rocker cover and the cylinder head is. So this is an RRS product, and you cut out all the strut tower and then you weld this in, and then there's also a steel strap that goes down the middle of it to add strength to it. That's 4mm plate, so it's really heavy. Actually adds quite a bit of strength to the strut tower, and then we use the RRS brand of strut coilover conversion, which you can just see the top of up there. The other big challenge you have with putting this engine in this car is there's no room for the brake booster, which normally sits in this area. So we're going to run what's called a Hydro Boost system, which is this one's off a Chevy Silverado, I think it is, and that's where you run power steering hydraulics up to the Hydro Boost system to pressurise the brakes, and then there'll be a new master cylinder goes on the end of that. We've started making the bracket, which is all bolted to the bell crank. Still a little bit of fabrication work needed there. I've got to get my mounts all set up and get that into a happy place, but I've got to wait for my master cylinder to arrive, which should come in on Wednesday, and we'll be able to see if that all fits, and then we can finish making that. So another problem with the Coyote conversions is you need to obviously keep them cool, and what I really wanted to do was keep the factory Ford Mustang radiator so that it all works perfectly with the engine. Now that presented some challenges because it's actually, the whole package is quite deep, the fan's quite deep, and we're going to run air conditioning as well, so I had to go the whole module. So I had to cut the front radiator support panel out quite a bit to get it to fit, and then make these mounts. These mounts are actually off a Mitsubishi Pajero of all things, but they fit perfectly, which is quite nice. And we're going to delete what's called the degas bottle, which comes in here, but the trouble with the degas bottle is it's really high, so we're going to delete that. And what I've managed to find is this radiator hose, which is almost the right one. There'll be an extension piece goes in there so that it mates up with that knuckle on there. There'll also be another radiator hose comes off the bottom and goes down there, which I've yet to buy. These are the heater hoses. They've also got hoses coming off them for the degas bottle, which will blank that one, and then this final hose here will link into this one here, so it should all work okay. We're also in the Ford Mustang, they run electric power steering, which we obviously can't do. So I've got a KRC power steering kit that is designed for the Coyote motors, and that's a nice short little belt that goes on there. And that'll also, as well as run our power steering rack that we're putting in it, we'll also run the hydraulic pressure for our Hydro Boost, so that all should work quite well. a company in America called PBH Performance. They make quite a few bits for these Coyote conversions, so they also do a air intake that comes through here, and that should work with the factory ECU over here. So this big mess in here is all of the wiring to make the engine run. Now, because this is what's called a Generation 1 Coyote, you can buy a kit from PBH in America that is a wiring kit, so you can use the factory engine ECU, which also runs the transmission, and then it all just plugs and plays, and you only need to do a few wire hookup to make it run. So I've got it just very, very temporarily laid into this area. I've used the factory Mustang bracket to mount the engine ECU, and this is normally where the battery goes in the Torino, but we're going to relocate that into the boot. So once I sort of get everything laid out, I'll obviously get all this tidied away, get it clipped to the side of the inner guards, run it around, hopefully tidy it up. This fuse box will probably end up mounting somewhere like that, and that also activates the fuel pump and the radiator fan. Battery, as I said, we'll put in the boot. That's all the factory connectors for that. So we'll be taking a lot of this bracketry off and just extending the cables. We'll take them to a battery isolation switch, which will mount on the back side of the strut tower, and then we'll run the cable into the car, down the transmission tunnel, and to the boot area. The battery isolation switch is partly so we can work on the car, but also partly for theft protection as well. Like I said, the plan with the car is we want to do some big long road trips in it, and so it'll be sitting outside our motel rooms and places like that, so it'll be good to be able to secure it in a couple of ways. And if one of those is turning the battery off, then that stops someone from driving it away. Okay, so this is the brake conversion and the coilover conversion that we buy from RRS, and as you can see, it's all adjustable, both height-wise here on the clevis and also on the spring as well. And also it has in and out adjustability for camber. So we've got infinite adjustability to get it handling really well. And they also run these really big slotted and vented brake discs. Now I think these they're in the Ford stud pattern, but I actually think these are HSV Commodore size disc rotor, because they're about 330 millimeters or 11 inches. But nice big brakes, runs a 2-piston caliper as well, and then they have this really nice cast aluminium stub axle on here as well, which all mates up with the factory lower control arms. I bought new factory control arms because my old ones were dented, and new adjustable camber bolts on the inside. The steering is a aftermarket unit as well from RRS, and it's a power steering rack rather than the steering box that these cars normally came in. So a lot less play or slop in the steering that you normally get in a steering box, and also a lot more room. So I never would have got the motor in with the factory steering box, I don't think. So this just opens all that up. The kit comes with a lot of brackets. There's a bracket that bolts to the lower chassis rail, and it's all bolted, but I'm actually going to weld that into place because the way I'm not too happy with the way it bolts in. I don't think it gives it enough strength, so I think we can do better. So at the moment we're sort of working on assembling everything, but we'll actually pull the whole thing. So when we bought the car, it was in a pretty rough shape, and so part of the problem of doing the engine conversion, we've also been having to do a restoration. So on one hand we're restoring the car, plus we're also modifying it, which is double the work and double the cost and double the headaches. But we're slowly getting on that side of it as well. One of the things that had happened in America is that it had a big accident over in this area through here at the front, and it had been to some, I won't call it a panel beater or a panel shop, I would call them butcher, for want of a better word, and what they've done is they've punched 4 holes in the inner guards and then wrapped chains around the strut towers and pulled the strut towers kind of straight. Nowhere near straight enough, but just kind of straight. The radiator support panel was quite badly mangled. Both of the inner guards were very mangled, and they obviously had holes punched in them from the chains. So before we could even start looking at doing the motor, putting the Coyote in, we had to get it all straight. So it's had to go on a chassis machine, and the guys at South Suburban Motor Bodies have done a really good job, and they pulled the chassis rail down and straight. They stripped all the front out and then pulled it. They also pulled the cross member straight, and the front cross member they had to pull out as well. Then they were stitched on a brand new rad support, both the inner guards, and fixed all the holes. And it was really good to be able to do that there, because they, the guy that owns South Suburban Motor Bodies, Frank, he also owns a Torino like this. So I think that was good contact to make. They never got the front beam or the front radius rod cross member perfectly straight. It was just a bit too mangled. But along the way I managed to buy another car. It was a station wagon from the South Island of New Zealand where we're from, which is about a 15-hour drive away. It was really rusty, but it actually had lots of good parts on it, and I still have some of that car left for parts. But I cut the front cross member out of that and out of this car, and I've swapped them around, so we've got a really mint front cross member in there now, so that was good to use that. Along the way we've also obviously fixed all of the holes that the guys in America have put it up when they punched the chains through, and yeah, just got the car perfectly straight. It's been on the chassis machine and it's been measured all 4 corners, so it's now nice and straight. So one of the big problems with this car is that the floor had been absolutely beaten on, and the car had run over multiple posts, traffic islands, people, horses, dogs, cows, who knows what it had run over. But the floor was absolutely beat to hell, and had holes in it and a lot of rust in it and things like that. So that was a big problem. So luckily AMD in America make brand new floors for these cars. So I cut out the old floor and we welded in this new one. The shame of it is that along the way we've had to cut up our brand new floor to fit the 6-speed 6R80 from the Coyote. It's just too big for the standard factory transmission tunnel, which was a little bit hard to do, but that's okay. But along the way we've managed to eliminate all the rust that was in the floor, and it was in multiple places. So, and we think the reason was that the cowl air vents had leaked. They'd actually rusted away. So instead of replacing those, I've actually blanked them off altogether, because quite frankly, you know, if you want fresh air, you wind the windows down. And yeah, the water just basically flowed over the floors and just completely rotted them. So there was just pinholes everywhere, as well as all the dents from all the damage. As well as doing that, I've also had to fix the firewall. So once again, that's the scrap car we got out of the South Island. It had a good parts of the firewall were good. So I've taken those out and welded those into the firewall as well. So that's fixed the big hole there. There's lots of random places where there's water, I think, leaked into the car, and it's got funny rust holes. Basically I've just got one left to fix now, which is, you can't probably see it on the camera, but it's on the other side, just in the pillar. And then that's all the rust's cleaned up, and the shell's rust free. We've had the car sandblasted once, but we'll just to expose where all the rust was and to take all the filler out of it. And I've had all the panels The panels you can take off have had them all acid dipped to remove paint and rust. The next plan will be to get the shell sandblasted again, and then immediately it'll get epoxy painted so that it's all sealed. Unfortunately, the time it's taken us to do all the rust repairs has been a bit of flash rust has appeared on some of the bare metal panels, but it won't need much. It won't cost a lot either to get everything sandblasted and cleaned and in epoxy, which will be a good feeling when it's all back to being one colour. It'll feel like we're actually starting to climb back up the other side. So that's the car so far. We've got a lot more to show you, but it gives you a bit of an idea of what we're doing and what we're building. We don't know when it'll be finished. It's just we do a little bit each week, and sometimes after hours, sometimes on weekends. I obviously have a full-time job and 2 boys that need my attention. So yeah, this keeps us busy and keeps us working in the garage.